That is a soul question. That's a soul-sized question. And what you're really asking is of the universe, dare I say of God. It's a sacred question. To put it in my language, it's a prayer. You're actually uttering a prayer. And you're saying, take away my distractions. Show me my soul's path and not the path of what I want based on insecurities, survival insecurities. But what have I been born to give? And that's a whole different trajectory of your life. Hi, everybody. It's time for an archetypal message. At the end of last year, I said that I would expand what I was doing with archetypes to include archetypal experiences. And though this is not, I don't know how to stop that. I don't know how to stop that. If any of you do, send me information on that. So, at the end of last year, I said I would do these archetypal themes, like things that are archetypal experiences that we all have in common. So I thought, because it's the last day of January, that I would still kind of do a New Year's message. And I thought I would examine what I think is one of those primary archetypal questions that everybody asks themselves. And it's interesting because there was a time when everybody did not ask themselves this question, but life has changed and we have changed. And the times in which we live have ushered in a very different focus for who we are and how we engage with life. And that question is, for what reason have I been born? When I do workshops, I ask people, how many of you have asked that question? And it's so much fun because most people will put their hands up, some kind of a little bit, some big. And then I'll say, how many of you have never asked that question? And nobody puts their hands up. So, why are people afraid to even own that they've asked that question? And that's because the question is archetypal in its very nature. And it's bigger than archetypal. It's a cosmic question. What you're actually saying to the universe is, take me down deep and show me the reason that you've given me life. There is something in us that knows that if I ask that question, maybe I'm going to change the direction of my life. Now, what I say to people all the time is, who do you think is going to answer that question when you ask it? I mean, who do you think is out there who's qualified to show up and say to you, well, I'm going to tell you the reason you were born is this? There isn't anybody. That is a soul question. That's a soul-sized question. And what you're really asking is of the universe, dare I say of God. It's a sacred question. To put it in my language, it's a prayer. You're actually uttering a prayer. And you're saying, take away my distractions. Show me my soul's path and not the path of what I want based on insecurities, survival insecurities. But what have I been born to give? And that's a whole different trajectory of your life. What have I been born to develop inside of me and to give to others, to leave this world a better place than I found it when I arrived, instead of what have I been born to acquire? When we start out in life, we start out motivated by the need to survive. That's universal. We have to figure out how to put a roof over our head, how to fill our refrigerator, how to put clothes on our back. This is life. We have to figure out that survival system in us. We have to be able to trust that somehow we're not going to be overwhelmed by the demands of the physical world, which get more and more intense. But to ask then that question, and let me just say that at some point that trajectory of living to acquire kind of runs out of steam. You wouldn't know it to look at, people who then acquire yachts and they have to have more houses and they have to have more this or more that. But I'm telling you that at some point, the acquisition of stuff loses its sparkle. I mean, if you have more stuff and you have more stuff and you have more stuff and then you have more stuff and then you have more stuff. And what happens, how often is it? I'm living in this apartment building, right? Excuse me. I'm having an allergy thing. I have made it a point to get to know as many people as I can in this building. I'm having the time of my life. Because this building is 2 blocks from where my house is. And for the longest time, I'd look up at the building and I think, what's it like to live in that building? And poof, here I am. And I realized all these people have been living here 2 blocks from me, and I never knew any of them. And so now I'm getting to know so many wonderful new people. And I thought that, apartment buildings were generally filled with a lot of young people. But in fact, this building is filled with people who are young, middle-aged, older than, they're just wonderful. And much to my surprise, I'm meeting a lot of people who are in that later part of their lives. And every single one of them has told me the same thing, some version of the same thing, which is, the kids are gone and I'm retired and I just don't want as much stuff anymore. And so we sold our house. I sold my house. I'm a widow. I'm a widower, whatever. I sold my house. And so I moved here, what I thought was temporarily, but I like the community and I'm going to stay for a while. But here's the thing that I want to emphasize. They all wanted to get rid of stuff because we go through acquiring stuff, having our stuff, and then when we're older, we think, I got to get rid of this stuff. I got to get rid of this stuff. So that's part of this archetypal thing of what am I going to do with all this stuff? And who wants all this stuff? And it's so funny because I'm kind of like in that too. And one of the things I acquired because of the age that I was born in was acquiring china. And that's my mother's fault. And that's my cousin's fault. And so I have all these sets of china. For Christ's sake, I could, honest to God, serve 100 people with all the china I have. So now I have all my wonderful nieces, and they don't want anything to do with it. A different generation. What do we want your china for? And I'm like, do you know how nice this is? They don't want anything to do with it. They don't want anything to do with my stuff. Okay, so I'm at that. Don't you want this? No. Alrighty then. But part of the humor of that is I'm at that stage, but so is a lot. But that's a stage we all get to. Like, what are we going to do with this stuff that we acquired? Because you get past the age in your life where you want to acquire. Instead, you simply want to experience. You want the experience of more people. You want the experience of more conversation. Your life values change. The question, for what reason did you give me life, is such a rich question to examine, no matter what age you're at. But it is a question that is a prayer. And I'll tell you something, if this were a different age, a different time, a different place, if we were in a monastery, for example, you would prepare to ask that question. You'd actually go into a retreat. You'd actually prepare to be able to receive the answer to that prayer because it was considered such a profound, courageous thing to finally ask. Why did you give me this life? What did you want me to do? What's my assignment? What's my contract? What's my holy mission? Not my physical survival. When people initially ask this, I think they assume because our first association with God is that God's an employer and that God operates on some kind of practical value system. Like if you don't do something that produces stuff, that produces money, that produces security, then your prayer wasn't answered. But what we do is the caboose on the train. Who we become is the focus. Who we become in life is the focus of heaven, not what we do. And I look at the history of, all the people that I have studied, all the mystics, all the remarkable people who've ended up changing the lives of so many people. And they too have gone through the transition of thinking that, for example, Francis of Assisi, I'm pouring myself back into Francis. I'm going to use these major examples, and nobody out there is going to be a Francis of Assisi, but whether it's Ignatius Loyola or Francis of Assisi, Teresa, any of these greats, Gandhi, any of them, I use them because you recognize their names. But there are so many other people. Someone I was talking to this morning, in fact, who had been a police officer. And you start out wanting to be something, wanting to be a great soldier on a crusade like Francis or Ignatius Loyola, wanting to be something big that feeds your ego, that feeds some part of your survival, that feeds your sense, I'll be safe, I'll be recognized, I'll be noticed, people will know who I am. And inevitably, all of these people have a story of how that part of their life fell apart. The police officer I spoke to this morning, how he almost made it to retirement, and then it fell apart, and then it fell apart. And then there's always the dark night of the soul, the part that said, wait a minute, I thought I was on the right track. I thought I was following everything. But what you were following was what will get me what I think I want, what will please my parents, what will make me comfortable, what will get me stuff, whatever stuff you want. And then what happens is in the crisis, in the darkness, in the aloneness, in the incubation time, a different you starts to emerge. A you that could never have heard or been attracted to or accepted the assistance that might come to you in this dark phase, in this second phase, in this phase of loss. I lost everything, says this man to me. But what he came out of it with was, as a police officer, he saw so much violence. And he was always in Chicago, always dealing with gunshots and this kind of thing. And now he works for a not-for-profit that is devoted to educating kids so they don't reach for guns. And he said it's the most fulfilling thing he's ever done. For what reason have I been born? To take the experience that he had and to give back and to change the lives of these kids, to do what he can. What my instruction to you, as you look at that question, is to say, what can I do with who I've become, who I'm becoming? What do I want to do? And sometimes you have to go through an incredible wall of resistance that says, I'm not ready to give. I still need to take. I don't have enough. I don't have enough. I don't have enough. I'm not secure yet. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough this. I don't have enough that. That's all fear talking. Leave that alone and just ask yourself, what have I got to give to this world? What do I notice that I respond to? Whether, excuse me, I really apologize. Whether you respond by criticizing or by noticing something and ask yourself, could I make a difference somehow? Do I have something inside of me that could possibly help others in a way that I never thought of before? Do I have a talent that I haven't tapped into? Do I just want to do something that doesn't put as, even here's something else. Even if you wanted to start by saying, I don't want as much pressure on me anymore. Even if your first stop in your examination of yourself is to look at your occupation and say, even as a writer, and say, you know what, I don't want to write about this anymore. I want to write about that. I actually want to share my perceptions about what I see going on in the world. Instead of this, I want to write more deeply. I want to write more profoundly. I want to write from my soul. Or how you want to spend your time, realizing that time is the most precious asset you have. We can't get more time. So you start thinking, wait a minute, you know what? I think I want to maybe distribute my time with more consciousness. Maybe I want to take care of myself a little better and set aside time for a walk every day and not say I'm too busy to do that, to help my body out, to help my mind out. Maybe I'm going to just start there. And you don't think that is an answer to the question, for what reason am I born? Have I been given life? But the truth is, when you ask for soul guidance, sometimes you have to be, sometimes you have to be prepared for that answer. Sometimes you have to be taken out of your ordinary routine and prepared to understand that answer in yourself. Sometimes it's so remarkable and so simple that if you were to hear, well, here's what you're going to do. You happen to be a really good listener. And you happen to be really good at giving hunch advice and counsel. Not just advice, but counsel. And counsels are grace. And so actually we would like to position you to be in a place that is full of people who have a lot of controversy in themselves. So we want to move you. And when you ask, for what reason have you been born, you are a channel of counsel. So we would like to use that. And if you heard that right off the bat, you would balk at it because you would think, what? There's just no glamour to that. There's no power to that. There's no, bling to that. So you have to be shifted gradually. And that shift has to come first. And sometimes you have to start by paying attention to what is shifting in you. And that shift oftentimes it comes through that little quiet voice of intuition that says, why aren't you exercising a little bit? Why don't you do something with your diet? Why don't you start just paying a little more attention to your inner self? And then we'll take it from there. Because unless your inner self is open, the kind of question you're asking can't be answered because you're just not listening. You haven't opened up the listening mechanism. So you start with that. Another thing you can do, which I think is, the way the mystical world works, it's not like the physical world. In the physical world, when you think, I've got to change, I don't live here. I live here because my house was flooded, so it's going through renovation. And You go to your house because you want to see big things change. I want to see the drywall up. I want to see the cabinets moved. I want to see, right? You want to see big things happening so you know you're eventually going to get back to your house. That's not how the mystical world works. The mystical world works quiet, subtly, but in the subtleness is its bigness, is its power. It works huge in the small, delicate things of life. So, for example, yet another thing I'm going to suggest is that you look at your life and you ask yourself a question like, how do I engage in my world? What do I dismiss as unimportant? And what should I reconsider? What do I dismiss? What do I think I have nothing to do with? When in fact, maybe I have a lot to do with it. To it. It's very common for me to hear, I don't watch the news. I don't watch the news. I don't like the news. Too much bad stuff. All of which is true. Not truth, but true. It's quite an effort to listen to all that blather on the news all the time, right? And yet, here's my point. My point is that here's a mystical truth. All life is interconnected. All life breathes together. So whether or not you watch the news, no matter what you watch, we are interconnected to everything that's happening in the world. So you take a mystical truth, like all life breathes together. So whether or not I watch the news, everything happening in the world is breathing in my system, everything. So how do I breathe back with it? How do I contribute something that is of use, that is positive to all that's happening in the world? Because all that's happening in the world has a lot of chaos. So is it possible that my doing something that is not chaotic can contribute somehow or other to the healing of this planet? Now that's a great big huge idea, truth to hold on to. It's huge. It's gargantuan. It's gargantuan, and it's so big it doesn't fit in your head. But if you squeeze that truth down to the size of a cell tissue in your body, and you realize that one cell tissue, one tiny little cell, has the power to change your health if it goes malignant on you. One cell. Because that cell can then contaminate another cell, and then another cell, and then turn into a tumor. So one cell has the power to communicate the quality of your health to your whole body. We are, each of us, a cell in this whole body. And so what we communicate is very vital to the whole. How we communicate, how we see things, and who we communicate with. And that part of, for what reason have I been born? Maybe I have the capacity to understand things a little bit more deeply, and how do I go about that? How do I see myself in the world? Do I see myself as just floating along, or am I an active agent of transformation? It's up to you and how you want to see yourself in the world. But when you ask cosmic-sized questions, you have to think of yourself as a cosmic-sized being. You can't think of yourself as just someone who wants a job or an occupation or wants something bigger and better and wants to be noticed. I mean, that's a child's view. If you ask a cosmic-sized prayer, if you release a cosmic-sized prayer, you have to be willing to play in the cosmic ballpark. You have to be willing to say, all right, show me how this system works. Show me how the system works. And I'm going to start playing by cosmic truths. The first of which is all life breathes together, which means I'm part of the whole. And if I'm part of the whole, it means the whole is part of me. And so even if you decided, I'm just going to start by engaging in my world, by looking at the world like I'm all connected to this. And if I'm connected to this, even if you start your day by saying, I'm going to just bless this world and do what I can for it, and think about every single person you meet, I think I'll just be a little nicer to them. Or I think I will withhold judgment. I think I will start participating in what I do to one, I do to all. As a living practice. Right there, you've changed the world. It doesn't matter that you can't see it, but you're changing yourself. And from changing yourself, what you're saying is, I'm becoming capable of managing a whole different quality of grace in myself, of being able to understand the world from a very different, intimate place. It's no longer distant. It is now part of me. I'm inviting a deep mystical truth to become an active force in my perceptual system. So I give that to you as a beginning stage, as a beginning step, saying that everybody asks that question. And it's not an answer that's going to come to you through FedEx or through a person. It's answered in the way you participate in the answer. You participate in the answer to that prayer. You become an active agent in how that prayer is answered. So, I send you a whole lot of grace because we need it. And thank you. And I hope 2024 turns out to be a year full of wondrous surprises for us. I really do. I hope the non-physical world really guides this universe we live in. Thank you, everybody.